Welcome to the CloudSME portal tutorial. In this tutorial video we will introduce a simple method to create and submit a parameter sweep workflow through the Cloud Broker platform. First we will create the graph of our workflow. Click the workflow menu point and select the Graph tab. Then click the Graph Editor button. Make sure you have the required Java applications. Select Graph, New Job, to add a new job to your graph. In this example we will need 3 jobs. By double-clicking on the orange icon of the job, you can change its name. Since this will be the generator job, we name it Gen. Click on the second job twice to set its name. This job will be the parameter sweep job of the workflow. Finally set the name of the third job, that will be the collector job. Choose the first job and click on the New Port button. Generator job requires 1 output port. PS job requires 2 input ports and 1 output port. Collector job requires 1 input port and 1 output port. After double-clicking on the first port of the generator job, set the job's port type to out. After double-clicking on the third port of the PS job, set the job's port type to out. After double-clicking on the second port of the collector job, set the job's port type to out. You can create connections between an output port and an input port by dragging your mouse cursor from one port to the other while holding down the left mouse button. Create connection between the output port of the generator job and the first input port of the PS job. In the next step, create connection between the PS job's output port and the input port of the collector job. Save the graph by clicking on the Graph menu and then Save. You can name your graph as you wish. In the next step we will create the concrete workflow from the previously created graph. Select Workflow, Create Concrete, from the menu. Select your saved graph name from the graph list. Add a name for your new workflow. Click OK. Now that you have the concrete workflow, you need to configure it. Select Workflow, Concrete. Go to the row of your workflow and click on Configure. Click on the icon of the job named Gen. The configuration window will appear. In the Job Executable tab, set the following properties. Select binary icon. Type, Cloud Broker. Name, CloudSME Prototype WS-PGRADE LPDS. Software, click on Enable Own Executable. Executable code of binary, select your own file to execute. In this job the executable is a simple script, the genuine number me.sh that generates in numbers. Resource, Open Nebula MTAs Taki. Region, Open Nebula MTAs Taki LPDS. Instance type, Open Nebula MTAs Taki M1.small. Argument string, 10, this job will generate 10 files with 10 numbers. Assign breakpoint, no breakpoint. Save the settings by clicking on the big green button at the bottom of the page. In the Job I/O tab, set the following properties. Output port's internal file name, gener. Storage type, permanent. Generator, yes, this property directly sets the role of this job. Save the settings by clicking on the big green button at the bottom of the page. Click on the icon of the PS job. The configuration window will appear. Select binary icon. Type, Cloud Broker. Name, CloudSME Prototype WS-PGRADE LPDS. Software, click on Enable Own Executable. Executable code of binary, select your own file to execute. In this example the executable is a simple script, the cell sleepsack.sh, that requires 2 numbers as inputs. Resource, Open Nebula MTAs Taki. Region, Open Nebula MTAs Taki LPDS. Instance type, Open Nebula MTAs Taki M1.small. Argument string, 1, this is the sleeping time in milliseconds. Assign breakpoint, no breakpoint. Save settings by clicking on the big green button on the bottom of the page. In the Job I/O tab, set the following properties. Select port 0. Input port's internal file name, input 1. Port 0 is in channel, therefore you only need to set the other input port, port 1. Input port's internal file name, input 2. Select Uploads icon. Source of input directed to this port, select the input file with the name input 2. Select port 2. Output port's internal file name, output. Save the settings by clicking on the big green button at the bottom of the page. Click on the icon of the call job. The configuration window will appear. In the Job Executable tab, set the following properties. Select binary icon. Type, Cloud Broker. Name, CloudSME Prototype WRLDs Taki LPDS. Software, click on Enable on Executable. Executable code of binary, select your own file to execute. In this example, the executable is a simple script, the ls.sh that lists directories. Resource, Open Nebula MTAs Taki. Region, Open Nebula MTAs Taki LPDS. Instance type, Open Nebula MTAs Taki M1.small. Assign breakpoint, no breakpoint. Save the settings by clicking on the big green button at the bottom of the page. In the Job I/O tab, set the following properties. Select port 0. Input port's internal file name, input. Check the parametric input details by clicking on the View button. Set the waiting property to all, this setting indicates the collector type. Select port 1. Output port's internal file name, output. Source type, permanent. Generator, no. Save the settings by clicking on the big green button at the bottom of the page. Save the entire configuration by clicking on the floppy icon on the top of the concrete window. Now we are going to submit the workflow. In the workflow, concrete window, click on the Submit button of your workflows row. The workflows can be submitted several times. To check the submissions of a specific workflow, click on the Details button. To check the state of one specific workflow, click on the Adjacent Details button. The running of this workflow could take several minutes. Click on the Refresh button to check its state. The final result of the workflow execution can be reached by clicking on the View Finished button in the row of the call job. Click on STD Output, in the Job Status window, to get the result. Click on the Download File Output button, to download the entire output in zip format. You can unzip the downloaded files to see all outputs on your computer. Thank you for watching our tutorial.